Behold, the Roman emperor, the most powerful man in the world, draped in a toga of deep, shimmering purple. The color is almost alive, a vibrant, incandescent hue that radiates authority, divinity, and immense wealth. This was the color of kings, a status symbol so potent and so astronomically expensive it was often worth more than its weight in gold. But this ultimate symbol of imperial power was not a Roman invention. It was the product of a closely guarded industrial secret, held for centuries by a mysterious seafaring people from the East. This documentary will investigate the story of Tyrian Purple. We will uncover how the technological mastery of this single, extraordinary color created a monopoly in ancient trade so powerful that it built an entire mercantile empire. How did the foul-smelling secret of a humble sea snail become the economic engine of the Phoenician civilization? To understand this secret, we must turn our gaze from the marble halls of Rome to the bustling ports of the Levant and the masters of the Mediterranean, the Phoenicians. Operating from their great city-states of Tyre, Sidon, and Byblos, the Phoenicians were an anomaly in the ancient world. Unlike the great land-based empires of Egypt, Babylon, or Persia, their domain was not the earth, but the sea. Their power did not come from conquering vast territories, but from mastering and controlling the arteries of commerce. They were the architects of a unique and powerful maritime empire, a sprawling network of colonies and trade routes built not on the strength of legions, but on the principles of business. At the very heart of this commercial empire, the engine that drove its vast economy was their most prized and profitable asset: the production of Tyrian Purple. This was not merely a product, it was a technological marvel, a secret chemical process that transformed the glands of a marine snail into the most desired color in human history. The immense profits generated by their monopoly on this single commodity were the venture capital that funded their entire enterprise. It paid for their revolutionary ships, carved from the famed cedars of Lebanon. It financed their daring voyages into uncharted waters, and it drove their colonial expansion from the shores of the Near East to the Pillars of Hercules at the edge of the Atlantic. Our investigation will deconstruct the Phoenician economic model by following the trail of this incredible color. We will begin on the shores of modern-day Lebanon, at the site of vast, stinking mounds of discarded snail shells, the archaeological fingerprints of an industrial-scale chemical operation unparalleled in the ancient world. We will reveal the complex, secret technology the Phoenicians perfected to create the dye and analyze the shrewd business practices they used to protect their monopoly for nearly 1,000 years. We will set sail on virtual reconstructions of their advanced ships to understand how the dye trade powered the first great age of maritime exploration and colonization. Finally, we will witness the dramatic moment when their monopoly was broken and their great city of Tyre faced the wrath of Alexander the Great. This is the story of how the mastery of a single chemical process reshaped the economy of the ancient world, creating a civilization of innovators, explorers, and the ultimate masters of ancient trade. In the visual landscape of the ancient world, true, lasting color was a rarity. The palettes of daily life were drawn from the earth, the muted browns of wool and linen, the pale yellows of saffron, the faded reds of madder root. Most dyes were fugitive, fading under the relentless sun and washing away with the rains. In this world of transient hues, one color stood apart, a declaration of permanence and power that defied the natural order. This was purple. Not the pale lilac of a common flower, but a deep, vibrant, and almost impossibly rich purple that seemed to possess its own inner light. This color was more than a dye. It was a code, a universally understood symbol of the highest echelons of status, divinity, and wealth. To understand the Phoenician Empire, one must first understand the powerful economy of this single extraordinary color. This association of purple with power was not an accident, it was a direct consequence of its extreme rarity. Across the ancient Near East, the Aegean, and the Mediterranean, a powerful consensus emerged. The right to wear this color was reserved for the select few who could afford its astronomical price and who possessed the authority to display it. In the Roman Republic, a stripe of Tyrian purple on a toga, the latus clavus, distinguished a senator from an ordinary citizen. By the time of the Empire, the full purple toga, the toga picta, was reserved for the emperor alone. Sumptuary laws were enacted, making it a capital crime for anyone of a lower class to wear the color of the divine ruler. The color became a legally enforced monopoly of power, its value enshrined in law, creating an artificial scarcity that further inflated its immense price on the open market of ancient trade. This was the ultimate status symbol, a commodity whose value was directly tied to its exclusivity. The color's prestige extended beyond the mortal realm. It was the color of the gods themselves. In religious ceremonies, purple was used to signify the sacred and the divine. The vestments of high priests, the curtains of holy sanctuaries, and the robes draped upon the statues of deities were often dyed with the precious substance. The Hebrew Bible describes in lavish detail the use of purple textiles in the construction of the tabernacle and for the garments of the high priest, marking it as a color fit for communication with the divine. This sacred association added another layer to its economic value. It was not just a luxury good, but a holy one, a commodity whose demand was driven by the deepest imperatives of faith and ritual. To possess it was to share in the majesty of both kings and gods, a powerful driver in the economy of desire. What made this specific purple so unique was not just its vibrant hue, but its incredible chemical properties, a key technological advantage over any competitor. Unlike plant-based dyes that faded quickly, Tyrian purple was a vat dye, meaning it bonded with the fabric at a molecular level. It was astonishingly color-fast. It did not fade in the sun. In fact, weathering and sunlight were said to make its color even deeper and more brilliant. A garment dyed with Tyrian purple was a permanent investment, a piece of tangible wealth that could be passed down through generations. This permanence was a powerful statement in a world where most things were ephemeral. It signified enduring power, dynastic wealth, and a legacy that would not fade. This technical superiority meant there were no true substitutes, a perfect condition for a market monopoly. These factors, its universal association with power, its legally enforced exclusivity, its sacred status, and its technological permanence combined to create a market with almost perfectly inelastic demand and an infinitesimally small supply. The price of Tyrian purple became legendary. Pound for pound, the highest quality dye was, at times, valued at 3 times its weight in gold. A single imperial toga could cost a fortune, the equivalent of a senator's entire annual income. This was not a commodity for the merely wealthy. It was for the mega-rich, for royal treasuries, and for the state itself. The immense profits to be made from this ancient trade were obvious to all. The civilization that could find the source of this color, master the secret of its production, and control its distribution would not just be selling a dye, they would be selling power, prestige, and a piece of divinity itself. They would be in possession of one of the most lucrative trade secrets in human history.
The architects of this powerful color monopoly were not a great land-based empire. They did not command vast armies of conquest or rule over sprawling agricultural heartlands. Their story begins on a narrow, fertile strip of the eastern Mediterranean coast, the land of Canaan, in a series of fiercely independent and intensely competitive city-states. These were cities like Byblos, the ancient hub of the papyrus trade, Sidon, the center of a revolutionary glass-making industry, and, most powerful of all, Tyre, an island fortress that would become the command center of a commercial empire. These were the Phoenicians, a Semitic-speaking people whose genius lay not in ruling the land, but in mastering the sea. Their unique geography and culture made them the perfect candidates to build a new kind of empire, an empire of ancient trade. The Phoenicians were, above all, a product of their environment. Hemmed in by the powerful civilizations of Mesopotamia to the east and Egypt to the south, and with the rugged Lebanon mountain range at their back, large-scale territorial expansion was never a viable option. Their geography forced them to turn their gaze in the only direction open to them, westwards, towards the vast, blue expanse of the Mediterranean Sea. The sea was their highway, their frontier, and their greatest resource. It was this outward-looking maritime perspective that would come to define their civilization and shape the unique structure of their economy. They were not farmers or conquerors. They were shipbuilders, sailors, and merchants. Their mastery of the sea was enabled by a unique and priceless local resource, the magnificent cedars of Lebanon. These ancient, slow-growing trees produced a timber that was the envy of the ancient world. It was strong, lightweight, and most importantly, incredibly resistant to rot and saltwater corrosion, making it the perfect material for building sturdy, seagoing vessels. The Phoenicians were the first to exploit this resource on a massive scale, developing advanced forestry and lumber milling techniques. The export of this high-quality timber was the foundational industry of the Phoenician economy, giving them the capital and the raw materials to build the fleets that would power their future expansion. The cedars gave them the tools to transform from a coastal people into the masters of the Mediterranean. With this superior timber, the Phoenicians became the most innovative shipwrights of their age. They are credited with perfecting the bireme, a revolutionary vessel that would dominate the seas for centuries. The bireme was a masterpiece of naval engineering, featuring 2 tiers of oarsmen, which dramatically increased its speed and power without compromising its stability. Crucially, they developed a new ship design with a deep, rounded hull and a strong keel, a vessel capable of carrying heavy cargo loads while still being maneuverable enough to be sailed, not just rowed. This round ship was the workhorse of their commercial fleet, the ancient equivalent of a modern cargo freighter. This technological leap gave the Phoenician merchants a significant competitive advantage in the world of ancient trade. They could carry more goods, travel faster, and sail further and more safely than any of their rivals. Their skill in shipbuilding was matched by their genius for navigation. The Phoenicians were the pioneers of open-sea sailing. While other ancient sailors timidly hugged the coastlines, navigating from one visible landmark to the next, the Phoenicians learned to venture out into the deep water, out of sight of land. They became expert celestial navigators, using the sun's position during the day, and most famously, the North Star, which the Greeks called the Phoenician Star, to guide them at night. This skill allowed them to sail in straight, direct lines across the open sea, dramatically shortening journey times and opening up new, more efficient trade routes. This mastery of the sea was the core competency of the Phoenician people. It was the platform upon which their entire commercial empire would be built. They had the ships, they had the skills, and now in the humble murex snail that lived on their shores, they had found the secret product that would finance their destiny.
The Phoenicians' maritime prowess gave them the means to build a commercial empire, but the engine of that empire, the source of its immense capital, was a closely guarded technological secret. It was a secret born not in a forge or a workshop, but from the depths of the sea itself. The source of the world's most valuable color was not a rare mineral or an exotic plant, but a humble and predatory sea snail.
The process of transforming this creature into a legendary dye was a feat of organic chemistry, a complex, multi-stage, and overwhelmingly foul-smelling procedure that was part science, part alchemy, and a cornerstone of the Phoenician economy. This was the stinking, brilliant secret of the Murex snail. The primary sources of the dye were two specific species of carnivorous sea snails common to the eastern Mediterranean coast, the Bolinus brandurus and the Hexaplex trunculus. These were not creatures that could be farmed. They had to be harvested from the sea, either caught in baited traps or gathered by hand from the rocky sea floor by divers. The process was laborious and dangerous, the first step in a supply chain that demanded immense effort. Once harvested, the snails were brought to specialized dyeing workshops located on the shoreline, always downwind from the main cities, for a very good reason. Ancient authors are unanimous in their descriptions of the process. The stench was legendary, a nauseating combination of rotting seafood and pungent chemicals that clung to the air for miles. This overpowering smell was the unfortunate but necessary byproduct of the Phoenicians' most profitable ancient trade. The dyer's art lay in extracting a single tiny gland from each snail, the hypobranchial gland. This required either the painstaking process of cracking open each individual shell, or for larger-scale production, crushing vast quantities of the snails wholesale. Inside this gland was a small amount of a clear, viscous fluid. This fluid, when first exposed to air and sunlight, was unremarkable. But the Phoenician dyers had discovered its secret potential through what must have been generations of careful observation and experimentation. The process they perfected was a masterful manipulation of photochemical reactions. The snail mucus contained several chemical precursors that, when subjected to a precise sequence of light and oxygen, would undergo a profound transformation. The process, as pieced together from classical accounts and modern scientific replication, was complex. The extracted glands would be placed in a vat of lead or tin, mixed with a large quantity of salt water, and left to putrefy for a number of days under the open sun. This was followed by a period of gentle, controlled heating, where the mixture was simmered for many more days. During this time, the clear fluid would slowly begin to change, shifting through a spectrum of colors, from white to yellow, to green, to blue, and finally to the deep reddish purple that was their goal. The dyer had to be a master chemist, understanding exactly when to stop the process to achieve the perfect, most valuable shade. It was a delicate and precise art, a trade secret passed down from master to apprentice, and it was the absolute foundation of their economic dominance. The most staggering aspect of this technology was its inefficiency. The amount of dye produced by each snail was infinitesimally small. Modern experiments have shown that it could take as many as 12,000 Murex snails to produce a mere 1.4 grams of pure dye, barely enough to color the trim of a single Roman toga. This incredible input-to-output ratio is what guaranteed the dye's astronomical cost and made it the ultimate luxury good. It was the physical embodiment of conspicuous consumption. The sheer profligate waste of tens of thousands of living creatures was woven into the very fabric of a purple garment, a visible declaration of its owner's immense wealth. The Phoenicians had not just discovered a dye, they had discovered the perfect formula for a luxury economy, a product whose extreme cost and laborious production were the very essence of its appeal. This stinking, secret process was the alchemical reaction that turned molasses into money.
The accounts of classical authors are compelling. The science of the Murex snail is fascinating. But the most powerful, tangible, and irrefutable evidence for the scale of the Phoenician dye monopoly lies on the coastlines of Lebanon and Tunisia. Here, Archaeologists have uncovered silent, monumental testaments to the sheer size of this ancient enterprise, colossal mounds of discarded sea snail shells. These are not small refuse piles. They are man-made hills, some covering acres of land and containing literally billions of shells, accumulated over centuries of relentless, methodical production. This is the archaeological fingerprint of the Phoenician economy, proof that the creation of Tyrian Purple was not a small-scale craft, but a vast, organized, industrial-level chemical operation, unlike anything else in the ancient world. The sheer scale of these shell mounds is difficult to comprehend. At the ancient sites of Sidon and Tyre, these deposits are enormous, in some places dozens of feet deep. Analysis has shown that these deposits consist almost exclusively of the two specific species of murex snail required for the dyeing process. Each and every shell has been deliberately broken in the exact same way, a small, precise hole made to allow for the efficient extraction of the tiny gland within. This is not the work of individuals tossing away the remains of a meal. It is the uniform, repetitive waste product of a highly organized and specialized workforce. These mounds represent the physical ledger of the Phoenician ancient trade, a quantifiable record of the millions upon millions of snails sacrificed to create a river of purple wealth. The existence of these specialized industrial zones provides a crucial insight into the Phoenician business model. The dye workshops were always located on the coast, providing direct access to their raw material, the sea. They were also, as noted, situated downwind from the main urban centers. This separation suggests a high degree of civic planning and an understanding of industrial pollution even in the ancient world. But more importantly, it points to a centralized and controlled production system. This was not a cottage industry, with families making dye in their backyards. The scale of these sites suggests large, dedicated workshops, perhaps owned or licensed by the city-state's ruling elite, employing a significant labor force. This was the factory floor of the Phoenician monopoly, a place where a closely guarded technological process was implemented on a mass scale. The archaeology of these sites also reveals the complexity of the operation. Alongside the shells, excavators have found the tools of the trade. The stone implements used to break the shells, large ceramic vats for the steeping and simmering processes, and the remains of ancient fire pits used for the controlled heating of the dye mixture. This evidence confirms that the Phoenicians had perfected a standardized, repeatable chemical process long before the dawn of modern science. This standardization was key to their economic success. It allowed them to produce a consistent, high-quality product, a reliable brand that customers from Egypt to Spain could trust. The name Tyrian Purple became a guarantee of quality, the most valuable brand in the luxury economy of the ancient world. This industrial-scale production had another profound consequence. It would have rapidly depleted the local snail populations. The insatiable demand for purple would have forced the Phoenicians to constantly seek out new, unexploited coastlines where the murex snails thrived. The archaeological evidence supports this. Smaller but still significant shell mounds have been found at Phoenician colonies and trading posts all across the Mediterranean, from Cyprus to Morocco. This suggests that the production of the dye was not limited to the Phoenician homeland. It was an export industry in itself. The secret technology was carried abroad by Phoenician specialists who would establish new production centers wherever the raw materials could be found. This industrial footprint scattered across 1,000 miles of coastline is the ultimate proof of their dominance. It shows a civilization that didn't just sell a product, but systematically industrialized an entire coastline to maintain its lucrative monopoly.
The industrial-scale production of Tyrian Purple gave the Phoenicians the supply for their commercial empire. But the true genius of their business model lay in how they managed the market. For nearly a millennium, they maintained an almost perfect monopoly on the world's most valuable dye. This was not an accident. It was the result of a deliberate and multifaceted business strategy designed to protect their core asset, their trade secret. The Phoenicians understood that the source of their immense wealth was not the snails itself, but the exclusive knowledge of how to transform it. Protecting this knowledge was the central organizing principle of their economy, allowing them to corner the market, eliminate competition, and dictate prices on a global scale. The first and most effective layer of their defense was geographical. The murex snails, while found in other parts of the Mediterranean, were most abundant and produced the highest quality dye along the specific coastlines that the Phoenicians controlled. The city-states of Tyre and Sidon were the epicenters of this resource. By establishing firm control over their own homeland's coastline, they physically controlled the primary source of the raw material. As their enterprise grew, this strategy was exported. When they established colonies, they didn't just look for safe harbors, they actively sought out and seized control of other coastlines rich in murex snails. This physical control of the resource base was the foundation of their monopoly, a powerful barrier to entry for any potential rival in the ancient trade. You couldn't replicate their product if you couldn't get access to the raw materials. The second layer was the protection of the process itself. The complex, multi-stage, and foul-smelling technique for creating the dye was a form of intellectual property, arguably one of the most valuable in the ancient world. This knowledge was likely held by a select few, specialized guilds of dyers, perhaps sworn to secrecy and operating under the direct patronage of the ruling families of Tyre. The process would have been passed down from master to apprentice, from father to son, never committed to public texts. The nauseating stench of the workshops, which kept the cities at a distance, also served as a natural deterrent, discouraging outsiders from casual observation. The entire process was shrouded in secrecy and mystique, a form of industrial alchemy whose secrets were guarded as jealously as any state military secret. This secrecy was likely enforced with an iron fist. While we have no direct records of Phoenician industrial espionage laws, the stakes were so high that any dyer who betrayed the secret to a rival would undoubtedly have faced the harshest of penalties. The Phoenicians were pragmatic merchants, and they would have understood the catastrophic economic consequences of their secret being leaked. They may have even actively spread disinformation, promoting false or incomplete recipes to lead competitors astray, a common practice in the world of high-stakes crafts. This combination of physical control over the resource and a culture of obsessive secrecy over the process created a formidable defense for their economic dominance. Finally, the Phoenicians built a powerful, globally recognized brand. The term Tyrian Purple was not just a descriptor, it was a guarantee of the highest quality. Just as a modern consumer might pay a premium for a luxury brand name, an ancient king or Roman senator would pay an astronomical price for the assurance that they were buying the genuine article from the Phoenician masters. They may have had competitors who produced inferior purple dyes from other sources, such as lichens or less effective mollusks, but these products were known to fade and lacked the vibrant, complex hue of the true Tyrian purple. The Phoenicians leveraged this brand reputation to crush any lesser competition. Their product was the gold standard, and in the economy of ultimate luxury, there is no substitute for the best. By controlling the resources, guarding the secret, and building an unassailable brand, the Phoenicians transformed a simple dye into the impenetrable fortress of their mercantile empire.
The immense profits generated by the Tyrian Purple monopoly provided the Phoenicians with a massive and continuous stream of capital. But wealth that is hoarded is static. The genius of the Phoenician economy lay in how they strategically reinvested this capital into a single, force-multiplying technology: their fleet. The Phoenician ship was the physical engine of their commercial empire, a masterpiece of naval engineering that allowed them to project their economic power across the known world. Financed by the foul-smelling profits of the dye trade and built from the legendary cedars of their homeland, the Phoenician ship was the tool that transformed a coastal monopoly into a pan-Mediterranean thalassocracy, or sea-based empire. The heart of their merchant fleet was the Phoenician round ship, a vessel purpose-built for commerce. Unlike the long, slender galleys of war, which sacrificed cargo space for speed, the round ship was designed with a deep, capacious, and rounded hull. This design maximized the internal volume, allowing a single vessel to carry tons of cargo, from heavy ingots of copper and tin to fragile amphorae of wine and oil, and of course, the bolts of priceless purple cloth. This focus on cargo capacity was a deliberate economic calculation. It allowed the Phoenicians to achieve an economy of scale in their ancient trade, moving more goods per voyage than their competitors, and thus increasing their profit margins. The ship itself was a floating warehouse, the key to a high-volume, long-distance business model. But cargo capacity was not their only innovation. The Phoenicians perfected a hybrid design that made their ships both sturdy and surprisingly swift. They were masters of sail, using a large, single square sail to harness the power of the wind for long-distance travel. Yet they also retained banks of oars, allowing their vessels to maneuver in and out of tight harbors, navigate treacherous coastal waters, and, crucially, make headway when the winds were unfavorable. This versatility gave them a critical advantage in reliability. A Phoenician merchant could promise to deliver his goods within a certain time frame, a promise his wind-dependent rivals could not always keep. This reliability made them the preferred shipping partners for the great empires of the Near East, further cementing their central role in the regional economy. The true symbol of their maritime power, however, was the bireme. While primarily a warship, the bireme was also the ultimate expression of their reinvested profits and the primary tool for protecting their monopoly. With its 2 tiers of rowers, it was the fastest and most powerful ship of its day. Its bow was equipped with a heavy, pointed bronze ram, a weapon designed not for conquest, but for the ruthless enforcement of commercial dominance. The Phoenician navy, funded by the dye trade, acted as the armed security force for their commercial operations. They used their swift biremes to hunt pirates, to protect their merchant convoys, and to intimidate any rival city-state that might contemplate encroaching on their trade routes or attempting to steal the secrets of their dye production. The bireme was the iron fist that protected the golden goose, a clear message that the Phoenician trade network was not to be challenged. It was these ships that allowed the Phoenicians to become the masters of the Mediterranean's resource network. They used their sturdy round ships to haul the raw materials needed by the great civilizations. They sailed to Cyprus for copper, to Spain for silver, and in their most legendary voyages, to the distant, misty isles of Britain for tin, the essential ingredient for making bronze. They became the indispensable middlemen, the great connectors of the ancient world. Their ships were the shuttles that wove the economic fabric of the Mediterranean, carrying raw materials to the manufacturing centers of the East, and finished goods, like their priceless purple textiles, back to the emerging markets of the West. Every league sailed, every ton of cargo hauled, was made possible by the foundational wealth generated by their stinking, secret, and staggeringly profitable dye monopoly. The cedar ship, in the end, was a vessel powered by purple.
The Phoenicians' mastery of the sea, powered by the profits of the Tyrian Purple trade, inevitably led them westwards. As they pushed the boundaries of the known world, they began a process that would define their legacy and reshape the Mediterranean: colonization. But the Phoenician concept of empire was radically different from that of Rome or Persia. They did not seek to conquer vast swaths of land or subjugate entire populations. Instead, they pursued a deliberate and pragmatic business strategy. establishing a network of coastal trading posts and colonies that functioned less like an empire of conquest and more like a modern multinational corporation opening a new series of international branch offices. Every new settlement was a node in their sprawling commercial network, a strategic investment designed to expand their ancient trade and strengthen their economic dominance. The primary driver of this westward expansion was the search for new resources. This included both the raw materials they traded as middlemen and, crucially, new sources for their signature product. As the demand for Tyrian Purple grew, the Murex snail populations along their own Levantine coast would have come under immense pressure. To sustain their industrial-scale production, they needed new, unexploited coastlines. Their advanced ships carried their explorers and specialists across the sea, and wherever they found significant populations of Murex snails on the coasts of Cyprus, Sicily, North Africa, and southern Spain, they established a foothold. These early settlements were often little more than specialized dye production workshops, industrial outposts created to secure a new supply chain for their most valuable commodity. From these initial industrial sites grew permanent, self-sustaining colonies. The most famous and powerful of these was Carthage, founded on the coast of modern-day Tunisia in the late 9th century BC. The location was chosen with a merchant's eye. It commanded the narrow strait between Sicily and Africa, a natural choke point for all east-west maritime trade. From Carthage, the Phoenicians could control the sea lanes and dominate the emerging markets of the western Mediterranean. Other colonies were established for different strategic reasons. Kition in Cyprus secured access to the island's rich copper mines. Settlements in Sicily and Sardinia were positioned to trade with the native peoples of Italy. And far to the west, the colony of Gader, modern-day Cadiz, was founded beyond the Pillars of Hercules, a gateway to the Atlantic and the legendary tin-rich lands of the north. These colonies were not military garrisons, but commercial hubs. They were designed as safe harbors or emporia, where Phoenician ships could anchor, repair, and resupply. They served as warehouses for storing goods and as secure marketplaces for trading with the local barbarian populations. The Phoenicians would arrive not with armies, but with cargoes of finished goods from the east, fine textiles, especially their irresistible purple cloth, mass-produced glass trinkets, wine, and metal tools. In exchange, they would acquire the raw materials of the West, unworked metals like silver, lead, and tin, salted fish, and raw hides. This business model was incredibly profitable. They were buying raw materials cheap and selling finished goods dear, practicing a classic form of arbitrage that generated immense wealth for the entire network. The economy of each colony was designed to be a vital, contributing part of the greater Phoenician commercial system. This network of colonies created a powerful, closed-loop economic system that reinforced their trade monopoly. The colonies provided the raw materials that the workshops in the east needed. The workshops in the east produced the finished goods that the colonies needed to trade with the locals. Phoenician ships, controlled by Phoenician merchants, managed every leg of the journey. It was a vertically integrated system that allowed them to control every stage of production and distribution, maximizing their profits and locking out competitors. This empire of ports, bound together by the sea and a shared commercial culture, was a revolutionary concept. It was a flexible, resilient, and incredibly wealthy system, and it was all built upon the initial success and staggering profitability of a single, secret color. Tyrian Purple was the undisputed crown jewel of the Phoenician economy, the high-profit engine that provided the immense capital for their expansion. But to view the Phoenicians as a civilization built on a single commodity would be to underestimate their extraordinary business acumen. The dye trade was the venture capital that funded a much larger and more diverse commercial enterprise.
The Phoenicians were not just manufacturers of a single luxury good. They were the master merchants of the entire Mediterranean, the indispensable middlemen who built a complex and resilient economy by trading in a wide portfolio of goods. This diversification is what transformed them from producers of a single product into the undisputed masters of ancient trade. The foundational pillar of their early economy, even before the purple dye industry reached its zenith, was the timber from their homeland. The slopes of Mount Lebanon were home to the world's most prized trees, the mighty cedars of Lebanon. This was not ordinary wood. It was strong, lightweight, aromatic, and miraculously resistant to rot and insect infestation, making it the premier construction material for shipbuilding, palace construction, and sacred architecture. The great kings of Egypt and Mesopotamia, ruling over lands largely devoid of quality timber, were willing to pay enormous sums for it. The Bible famously records King Solomon of Israel importing vast quantities of Phoenician cedar along with Phoenician architects and craftsmen to build the first temple in Jerusalem. This timber trade not only gave the Phoenicians their initial wealth, but also established their reputation as reliable suppliers of high-quality natural resources. Building on their reputation as master craftsmen, the Phoenicians became pioneers in the art of glassmaking. While the origins of glass are in Mesopotamia and Egypt, it was the Phoenicians, particularly those from the city of Sidon, who transformed it from a rare, opaque luxury into a more widespread, translucent commodity. They perfected the technique of core-formed glass, creating small, beautiful vessels for perfumes and oils, and mass-produced colorful glass beads. These beads, cheap to make but exotic and beautiful to foreign eyes, became a perfect trade good for bartering with less developed societies across the Mediterranean. The Phoenicians had mastered the art of turning a common resource, sand, into a high-value, easily transportable product, another lucrative branch of their export-driven economy. The Phoenicians were also masters of metallurgy and ivory carving, acting as both producers and cultural synthesizers. Their workshops produced intricate silver bowls, delicate golden jewelry, and ornate carved ivory plaques. Their artistic style was a unique and commercially successful fusion of Egyptian and Mesopotamian motifs, tailored to the tastes of a broad international market. But more important than their own production was their role in the global metals trade. Their ships became the essential conduit for the raw materials that fueled the Bronze and Iron Ages. They moved copper from Cyprus and iron from Anatolia, but their most critical and legendary trade was in tin. Tin was the strategic material of the Bronze Age, as vital and as rare as uranium in the 20th century. While copper was relatively common, tin sources were incredibly scarce. The primary source for the entire Near East was in the distant, almost mythical lands of the Far West, likely Cornwall in Britain. The Phoenicians, with their superior ships and unparalleled navigational skills, were the only ones who dared to make this perilous, long-distance voyage into the Atlantic. By controlling the tin supply chain, they held the entire Bronze Age economy in their hands. They practiced the ultimate form of arbitrage, buying tin for a low price from the barbarian miners in the north and selling it for an astronomical profit to the great empires of the East. This monopoly on logistics was perhaps even more significant than their monopoly on purple dye. Yet the most significant product the Phoenicians exported was not a physical good, but an idea: the alphabet. Born from the practical needs of their sprawling commercial empire, the Phoenician alphabet was a revolutionary piece of software for the business of trade. Unlike the complex hieroglyphic or cuneiform scripts with their hundreds of symbols, the Phoenician system used just 22 simple characters representing consonant sounds. It was easy to learn, quick to write, and perfectly suited for recording contracts, logging inventory, and communicating between distant ports. This elegant, efficient tool for managing information spread wherever their ships sailed, carried by the very merchants who relied on it. It was the ultimate testament to their civilization. Even their greatest cultural contribution was a product of their unrivaled mastery of the ancient economy.
For nearly 1,000 years, the Phoenician mercantile empire had weathered the rise and fall of its powerful neighbors.
They had paid tribute to Egyptians, resisted Assyrians, and traded with Babylonians and Persians, all while fiercely maintaining the commercial and political independence of their heartland. Their power was based on a simple, enduring principle. As long as they were the indispensable masters of the sea and the sole purveyors of the world's most desired commodities, they were too valuable to be destroyed. But in 332 BC, this long era of pragmatic survival came to a dramatic and brutal end. A new force was marching across the world, a force that did not play by the old rules of tribute and trade. This was Alexander the Great, and his legendary siege of the island fortress of Tyre would not just break a city, it would shatter the foundations of the Phoenician economy and bring their great age of dominance to a close. Tyre was the jewel of the Phoenician world, the richest and most powerful of the city-states, and the headquarters of the Tyrian Purple monopoly. Its wealth was legendary, but so was its arrogance. The city was built on an island, separated from the mainland by a half-mile of open water, and was protected by colossal 150-foot-high walls that rose directly from the sea. The Tyrians were masters of the waves, and they believed their naval supremacy made their island fortress impregnable. When Alexander's Macedonian army arrived on the coast, the rulers of Tyre refused to submit. They offered him tribute, but they would not grant him entry to their city to sacrifice at the temple of Melkart. For Alexander, this act of defiance from a mere trading city was an intolerable insult to his authority and a dangerous obstacle to his plans for conquering Egypt and Persia. He resolved to do the impossible, to conquer a city that could not be reached. What followed was one of the most audacious and brutal feats of military engineering in ancient history. Since he could not challenge Tyre's navy at sea, Alexander decided to bring the land to the city. He commanded his engineers to build a massive causeway, a stone mole, 200 feet wide, across the sea channel to the island's walls. The project was monumental. For 7 months, his soldiers and thousands of conscripted laborers toiled, demolishing the old mainland city of Tyre for stone and cutting down the precious cedars of Lebanon for timber pilings. The Tyrians fought back with ferocious ingenuity. They used their powerful navy to raid the construction crews, firing arrows and catapult stones. They launched a spectacular fireship attack, a vessel packed with combustibles that slammed into the causeway and set Alexander's siege towers ablaze. For a time, it seemed the city's sea power would prevail. But Alexander was relentless. He systematically conquered the other Phoenician city-states and, in a stroke of geopolitical genius, co-opted their fleets, amassing a navy of over 200 ships that could finally challenge Tyre on its own terms. With his new fleet blockading the island's harbors and his causeway finally reaching the city walls, the final bloody assault began. Macedonian siege towers, the tallest ever built, rained down missiles on the defenders, while battering rams mounted on ships pounded at the seawalls. In the summer of 332 BC, the walls were breached. The slaughter that followed was horrific. Thousands of Tyrians were killed in the fighting, and the Macedonians, enraged by the long and costly siege, showed no mercy. According to historical accounts, some 30,000 of the city citizens were sold into slavery. The fall of Tyre was a catastrophic blow to the Phoenician world and its ancient trade network. The city's ruling elite was annihilated, its workshops were destroyed, and its vast wealth was plundered. The command center of the purple dye monopoly had been decapitated. While the industry would eventually recover, it would never again be the exclusive domain of an independent Phoenician power. Alexander's conquest of the Near East ushered in the Hellenistic Age, a new era of Greek language, culture, and commerce that flooded the region. The secrets of the Phoenicians began to disseminate. Greek and later Roman entrepreneurs began to establish their own dyeing operations, breaking the long-held monopoly. The Romans, in particular, co-opted the tradition of purple, transforming it from a commodity in the economy of trade to a state-controlled symbol of their own power. By the time of the Roman Empire, the most important purple dye workshops were imperial monopolies, their output reserved for the emperor and the state. The fall of Tyre was the beginning of the end. The fire and blood of Alexander's siege had not just conquered a city, it had torn the secret of the color of kings from the hands of the merchants who had built an empire upon it.
Our investigation began with the power of a single color, a deep, royal purple that symbolized the apex of wealth and authority in the ancient world. We sought to understand how this commodity could build an empire. Having journeyed from the stinking workshops of Caire to the far-flung colonies of the Western Mediterranean, the evidence is now clear, and the verdict can be rendered. The Phoenician civilization engineered a unique and powerful maritime empire, a thalassocracy, built not on the conquest of land, but on the absolute control of commerce. The economic engine of this extraordinary enterprise, the venture capital that funded their ships, their expansion, and their legacy, was a fiercely protected technological monopoly on the production of Tyrian purple dye. We have established that the market for this commodity was practically limitless. As the universally recognized color of kings and gods, its demand was driven by the deepest imperatives of power, status, and religion. Its extreme rarity and technological permanence, a color that would not fade, created the perfect conditions for a luxury good, allowing the Phoenicians to command prices that were, at times, higher than gold. This insatiable demand was the economic gravity that pulled their entire enterprise forward. Our investigation then uncovered the core of their genius, a multi-layered monopoly. At its heart was a proprietary technology, the complex, secret, and industrial-scale chemical process of transforming thousands of humble murex snails into a few grams of priceless dye. The archaeological evidence of vast man-made hills of shells confirms that this was not a craft, but a massive industrial operation without parallel. We have seen how the Phoenicians protected this trade secret with a brilliant business strategy. They physically controlled the coastlines where the raw materials were abundant, they shrouded the production process in a culture of intense secrecy, and they built an unassailable global brand, Tyrian Purple, that guaranteed quality and crushed all competition. Crucially, we have demonstrated that the profits from this monopoly were not simply hoarded, but were strategically reinvested into the technology of trade itself. The immense wealth generated by the dye trade was the capital that launched the most advanced fleet of the age. Their superior cedar ships, from the capacious round ship to the swift bireme, were the tools that allowed them to dominate the sea lanes, protect their monopoly with force, and become the indispensable middlemen for the entire Mediterranean economy. Finally, we have shown that this maritime dominance funded by purple directly powered their colonial expansion. The search for new snail colonies and new markets was a business decision that drove them to establish a network of ports from Cyprus to Carthage and beyond. This empire of ports was a vertically integrated commercial system, a masterpiece of ancient trade that allowed them to control every aspect of their diversified economy, from the mining of British tin to the export of Lebanese cedar. Therefore, the final conclusion of our investigation is this: the Phoenician thalassocracy was built on the foundation of a technological secret. The engine of their vast economy was the industrial-scale production of Tyrian purple. It was the foul-smelling, jealously guarded, and staggeringly profitable secret of a humble sea snail that paid for the ships, the colonies, and the commercial network that forever places the Phoenicians among the greatest and most innovative traders in human history.
The brutal siege of Tyre and the rise of Rome marked the end of the Phoenician Age of Independence. The secrets of their famous dye were eventually unraveled and co-opted by their successors, the vibrant purple becoming a symbol of Roman, not Phoenician, power. Yet to measure the legacy of the Phoenicians by the fate of a single city or the loss of a single monopoly is to miss the true scale of their contribution to history. The story of Tyrian Purple is not just about a color. It is about the innovative and resilient civilization that this single commodity empowered. The Phoenicians were the great connectors of the ancient world, and their influence, carried on the tides of commerce, fundamentally shaped the course of Western civilization. Their most profound legacy is the very model of a trade-based maritime empire. While other civilizations built their power on the backs of farmers and soldiers, the Phoenicians built theirs in the holds of their cedar ships. They pioneered the concept of a networked empire, a system of interconnected coastal colonies designed not for territorial conquest, but for the maximization of profit and the control of commercial routes. This model of a thalassocracy, an empire of the sea, would echo throughout history, providing a blueprint for later maritime powers, from the Athenians and the Carthaginians, their own direct descendants, to the Venetians and the Dutch. They were the original architects of a globalized economy, proving that the power to move goods and control markets could be as formidable as the power to command armies. But perhaps their most significant contribution, the tool that would outlast their ships and their cities, was a direct byproduct of their commercial needs. The complex, multilingual, and far-flung nature of their ancient trade network required a simple, efficient, and universal method of record-keeping. The cumbersome cuneiform and hieroglyphic scripts of the old empires were ill-suited for the fast-paced world of international commerce. In response to this business need, the Phoenicians developed and propping efficiency. It was easy to learn, quick to write, and perfectly adapted for the pragmatic needs of a merchant logging inventory or a captain recording a contract. As their ships sailed, they carried this intellectual cargo alongside their purple textiles and tin ingots. The alphabet was their killer app, and it spread like wildfire across the Mediterranean. The Greeks adopted it, adding vowels and using it to write down everything from epic poetry to the foundations of philosophy and democracy. The Etruscans learned it from the Greeks, and they in turn passed it on to a rising tribe on the banks of the Tiber, the Romans. The very letters we use to write these words today are the direct descendants of the script developed by those ancient mariner merchants. It is the ultimate testament to their legacy. A civilization so deeply rooted in the practicalities of trade that its greatest invention was a tool for doing business better. Thus, the story of Tyrian Purple is far more than the history of a luxury good. It is a story of how the relentless pursuit of a technological and economic advantage can fuel a civilization's rise. The stinking workshops of Tyre and Sidon produced a dye that colored the robes of kings, but the profits from that dye funded an explosion of innovation in shipbuilding, navigation, and colonization. It powered a network that not only moved commodities, but also exchanged ideas, technologies, and cultures, weaving the disparate peoples of the Mediterranean into a single, interconnected world. The Phoenicians, the masters of the purple secret, proved that commerce could be one of the most powerful and creative forces in human history.